Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down some of the core ideas in environmental science. We're going to look at how we approach environmental issues, from some major historical debates all the way to modern solutions. By the end of this, you'll have a really solid handle on the key challenges and the options we have to address them. Okay, so here's our roadmap. We'll start by exploring two very different and often conflicting views on how we should interact with nature. Then we'll trace the history of how environmental thinking has changed over time. After that, we'll look at the toolkit we have for fixing problems. Then we'll define sustainability, which is a huge concept. And we'll finish up with the key points you'll definitely want to remember. So most of us can agree that environmental issues are important, but where things get complicated is how we should interact with the natural world. This has been a huge debate for a long, long time, and it really comes down to one big question. Are natural resources for us to use, or should they be left alone? On one side, you have conservation. Think of it as wise, practical management. It's a utilitarian approach that says, let's use our natural resources, but let's do it smartly so they last a long time and benefit the most people. On the other side, you've got preservation. This view says that nature has value in and of itself, completely separate from what it can do for humans. The goal here isn't to use nature, but to protect it from use. Now, this wasn't just some academic debate people had in a classroom. It had very real consequences. And probably the best example of this clash is the fight over the Hetch Hetchy Valley in California, way back in the early 1900s. So here's the situation. The city of San Francisco desperately needed a stable water supply, especially after the devastating 1906 earthquake. They looked east toward Yosemite National Park and saw the Hetch Hetchy Valley as the perfect place to build a dam and create a reservoir. The only problem? It would mean flooding a valley that many people considered just as beautiful as Yosemite itself. And this is where our two philosophies went head to head. The conservationists argued that damming the valley was a wise and responsible use of a natural resource for the public good, providing water for a major city. But the preservationists were horrified. They fought hard to protect the valley from being destroyed. In the end, the conservationist view won. The dam was built and the valley was flooded. But this conflict really defined the central tension in environmentalism that honestly still exists today. Okay, so that sets the stage, but our relationship with nature didn't stay stuck in that one debate. It's evolved a lot over time, so let's take a look at how we got from there to here. If you look back at the 1700s and 1800s, it was pretty much an era of exploitation. The general mindset was that resources were limitless. But by the late 1800s, people started to see the consequences, which gave rise to that conservation movement we just talked about. Then something really different happened in the 1960s. The focus shifted. People started worrying less about running out of trees and more about things like pollution, pesticides, and the quality of our air and water. A huge catalyst for this modern environmental movement was Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. It came out in 1962, and it was an absolute bombshell. It documented the devastating effects of pesticides like DDT on wildlife, and it really woke the public up to a new kind of environmental threat, one that was invisible and could affect everyone's health. It broadened the whole conversation. And all this new public concern and activism had a real impact. It led directly to major new laws, and in 1970, the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA. This was a huge deal. It basically cemented environmental protection as a national priority and gave the government the power to regulate pollution. So once we started recognizing all this damage, the next logical question was, well, how do we fix it? And that brings us to the science of restoration ecology. Think of it as a toolkit for trying to heal ecosystems. The first tool in the kit is restoration. This is the most ambitious approach. The goal is to turn back the clock and return a damaged area to what it was like before it was altered. It's trying to recreate the original ecosystem as closely as possible. Then there's reclamation. This one is a bit more practical. Instead of trying to get back to the original state, the goal is to make the land productive and useful again, just in a different way. A classic example is taking an old abandoned mine site and turning it into pasture land for grazing. Next up is mitigation. This is all about offsetting or compensating for damage. The basic idea is, if you're going to cause some environmental harm in one place, say you have to build over a wetland, you are required to create, restore, or protect a wetland somewhere else to balance it out. And finally, we have remediation. This one is very specific. It's about cleanup. Remediation deals directly with removing or containing pollutants from soil, water, or air, especially when there's a threat to human health. Think of cleaning up toxic waste at a Superfund site. That's remediation. Okay, so repairing past damage is obviously crucial. But an even bigger idea in modern environmental science is how we can avoid causing that damage in the first place. And this brings us to the really important concept of sustainability. You've probably heard this word a lot, but what does it actually mean? Well, the most common definition is this. Sustainability means meeting our own needs today without messing up the ability of future generations to meet their needs. It's really about long-term thinking and fairness to the people who will come after us. A really simple way to think about sustainability is to look at our resources. On one hand, you have non-renewable resources like coal and oil. They're finite. Once we use them up, they're gone for all practical purposes. Using them is, by definition, unsustainable. On the other hand, you have renewable resources, like energy from the sun or the wind. These are naturally replenished, so we can use them far, far into the future without running out. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground, so let's just pause and do a quick recap of the essential concepts. These are the main ideas you'll want to have straight for any quizzes or discussions. First, remember that fundamental split in environmental philosophy. Conservation is about the wise use of resources. Preservation is about protection from use. And remember that the modern environmental movement, starting in the 60s, brought in a new focus on pollution and the quality of the environment. Next, know your toolkit for fixing environmental damage. These are your 4 R's. Restoration is returning it to its original state. Reclamation is repurposing it for a new use. Mitigation is compensating for damage elsewhere. And remediation is cleaning up pollution. And finally, the big, forward-looking idea, sustainability. It's all about finding a balance between meeting our needs now and ensuring that future generations can do the same. It's really the guiding principle for long-term environmental health. And that brings us to the end of this explainer. The final question to think about is how we can take all these ideas, the historical lessons, the different philosophies, the tools we have, and actually apply them to build a better, more sustainable future.